Uncle Dan,
Oh, hello.
'tis the season.
I hear those sleigh bells ringling.
Yep,
Ding, ting, tingling.
Not
too.
all of them are sleigh bells.
That's true. The most persistent bells this time of year, at least in these United States and other civilized countries,
Right.
is the annoyance that is.
The Salvation Army.
That's right.
Let's just get right fucking to it.
Yeah,
guys.
dive in there. Mark, you're going to teach us all about the beautiful charity of the Sally Ann.
We're going to meet this very peculiar holdover from the 19th century that still haunts parking lots across these United States and probably many of the Canadian territories as well.
Yeah.
And they're kind of all over the world. And we're going to find out that they specifically bedevil a very surprising country.
Oh?
Yeah, this kind of surprised me. But anyway, we've all felt that pang of guilt maybe in life when we walk past that chilly soul standing outside by the tripod with the red kettle in it, ringing the bell with no
Right.
gloves on in the winter. And you're like, I could throw a few coins in.
Sure.
What's the harm? Well, I'm going to tell you what the harm is, and that you probably shouldn't throw a few coins in. So the Salvation Army that we've all seen around was founded in 1865 in London by William and Catherine Booth,
Aha.
who were both staunch anti-alcohol activists and staunchly anti-labor rights. So
Lovely.
Yeah. That's.
yeah,
If there's one thing that we can say about the Lord, it's that he hated when people were paid fairly.
exactly. He hated wine and he hated people getting money. So there's an odd little aside that I just thought was weird, that their first of many public confrontations where they would go into bars and kind of attack drunks with tuba music was in London's Blind Beggar Pub.
Oh.
Yeah, just thought that was a nice little piece of history.
Yeah.
So
Because
here-
everybody loves that guy that comes to you and preaches at you
Yeah.
when you about the thing that you're currently doing.
This
and-
is a
and the evil of
turbocharged
it.
version of the guy with the guitar at the party.
Right.
A 12-piece brass band showing up while you're just trying to have your drink. So here is the actual mission statement for their militant little brass band army.
Oh.
The Salvation Army, an international movement, is an evangelical part of the Universal Christian Church. Its message is based on the Bible. Its ministry is motivated by the love of God. Its mission is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to meet the human needs in his name without discrimination.
Well, that sounds great.
I feel
Sounds
like
great.
there's an asterisk next to it.
There's we're going to find out there's a little problem with that last sentence structure. But back to their history a bit. So their temperance crusade against alcohol, obviously, was what really set them apart early on. So in their spiffy quasi-military uniforms, they'd march into a pub or a bar, fire up an old-style military brass band, and they would sing hymns or popular music with the words rewritten to support their evangelicism and their crusade. As you might expect, this was not always met with the joyful wonder they'd hoped it would be.
No, that sounds like the reason why bartenders keep guns.
Take me down to the temperate city where the grass is green and the girls are comely.
And
The girls are never prettier than they were when I started the evening.
then rocks and bottles. So literally, they were chased out of bars all the time, but
Yeah.
they were good Christian pricks, so they kept at it. And they're also very well known for being antagonistic to a group of people called the Wobblies.
Oh, yes.
The IWW, or the old Industrial Workers of the World, was a socialist workers union and affiliated parties that were trying to improve the conditions of the working person and therefore lift them out of poverty.
And the IWW was especially famous because they were the one workers union that would let in anybody.
Yeah.
It didn't matter their race.
Yep.
It didn't matter their, if they were
Profession.
upside down. It didn't matter. They would let you in, whatever your profession, whatever your race, whatever.
They were trying to organize everything.
Yeah.
They were trying, and that was their way to get people out of poverty and destitution, was to make working life work better for people, to make capitalism work better for people, essentially, right? So
fuck them.
So
Gotta go.
the Salvation Army hated them. So actual brawls would break out between Salvation Army speakers or their bands and IWW speakers. So it's the late 19th century at this point. You can guess which side the cops jumped in on, right? The radical leftist rabble rousers making trouble for the bosses, or the nice Christian folks just wanting to play some smart marches. So while the Wobblies were trying to make structural changes in the way capitalism worked, basically lift people out of poverty, the Salvation Army was very, very much invested in making sure that the God-ordained wealthy were not to be discomforted.
Right.
And that gambling, alcoholism, etc., were not symptomatic of structural failures in society at large, but were the failings of individual gamblers and drunks.
Of course.
And in fact, co-founder Catherine Booth, who seems like a very nice person, made the very real political agenda of this apolitical organization clear when she was addressing the wealthy donors, and she said, "The Salvation Army is the only organization whose members to any appreciable extent buttonhole the dangerous classes on their own ground and turn them away from anarchy, infidelity, and socialism."
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, the truth is, who can you give your charity to if there are no more poor people?
That's right. And that need buttonholing, apparently. That was the fashion at the time. So a little more cheerfully, her husband, William Booth, said, "The three S's best express the way in which the Army administered to the down and outs. First soup, second soap, and finally salvation."
Can I skip the last one?
Thanks for the soup and soap.
Yeah.
I've got a brass band to go see. So they began. So the Army began this Christian evangelizing outreach to the rabble and the working class in the English-speaking world, especially.
Yeah.
And they were mostly welcomed with open arms because in crowded cities with high unemployment and social ills that come with it, they were only too happy to have them. And remember, most countries had no real social safety net.
Right, because they were giving food. They were giving... Yeah. The soup and soap thing is real.
Yeah, and in exchange, you had to sit through a little bit of a salvation situation.
Right.
So, but good on them. They were feeding people when societies were failing to kind of do that properly. So, but the other side of that is, it is those people on the ragged edge of society that tend to be the most exploitable,
Yeah.
the easiest to take advantage of. So good thing that didn't happen. So most people know the Salvation Army is a charitable organization, and it is for sure that. It has done and continues to be one of the first groups in following massive disasters and mass casualty events like the tsunami. We all know about the thrift stores, etc. The point of this segment isn't to say they don't do good. They do, but it's pretty conditional.
Right.
And it's so mixed up with evangelism that ethical people should look to donate elsewhere. And remember, it is an evangelical Christian literal church.
Yeah. You're not giving to a charity. You're giving to a church that does some charitable
Right.
stuff.
Right. And they put their charity up, the appearance of the charity up front.
Right.
And in so doing, a lot of people don't actually think they're donating to a church.
Yeah, you're donating to somebody's church. You might as well go in and throw something onto a collection plate or whatever.
So they have the 11 principles that kind of that they believe in. And I found these two were very interesting. We believe that our first parents were created in a state of innocency, which is a new word to me. But through their disobedience, they lost their purity and happiness, and that in consequence of their fall, all men have become sinners, totally depraved, and as such are justly exposed to the wrath of God.
Totally depraved. I love that we're all totally not just you could be partially depraved or
Nope.
even mostly
Or maybe you just
depraved.
cheated at a card game one time,
Nope,
but
you are totally depraved.
no choice. And then another one is, we believe in the immortality of the soul, the resurrection of the body, the general judgment at the end of the world, in the eternal happiness of the righteous, and in the endless punishment of the wicked. Jesus. Just they want to make it very clear where they stand on this stuff. So, a lot of typical evangelical shite, and who cares?
Yeah.
But part of what makes the Army insidious is that the reliance that has long been placed on it by governments, most interestingly, Australia, has allowed their prime directive of evangelizing to creep into loads of places it should not. So all over the world, but it seems, again, most intensely in Australia, the government relies on the Army to administer a range of social services like homeless outreach, drug and alcohol counseling, old folks home, daycare, even employment service centers, etc. Now, one of their foundational principles is, quote, spiritual welfare. Its charitable work remains indirect evangelical work, right? So missionary work by another name. And as one soldier said, and yes, they have this whole military rank thing going on, like Scientology. They have uniforms and all that shit. Quote, all the time at any task, I'm doing the work of an evangelist. The aim is to communicate Jesus. So before they get whatever social or religious assignment training that they're going to, they first get training in overt and covert evangelism. So if they're administering government-funded social services in secular societies, they're always sneaking Jesus into it. On top of that, investigations have shown that in some cases, the people running the jobs programs or drug treatment have little to no training in whatever life and death program they're running. Even shittier, a lot of the people they employ in thrift shops and other enterprises are former addicts, former convicts, and the disabled, which you would think is kind of noble. But again, they are the most exploitable classes of people. And investigations have shown super shitty working conditions, below poverty wages for vulnerable people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
There are also numerous stories of exploitation of indigenous people throughout the world, most terribly Aboriginal missions in, again, Australia. Come on, Australia, what the fuck? Where their culture was erased and replaced with the Army's version of Christianity, and children were forcibly removed and adopted out to white families, a policy that continued into the 1960s.
Which we here in Utah know nothing about.
Right.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
nobody around here has taken indigenous people out of their families.
Exactly.
And continues at our southern border to this day. So, and of course, lastly, there's the Salvation Army's revulsion towards the LGBTQ community the world over.
Surprise.
Right. You skipped on in their little articles of faith there. You skipped the no homo one.
Yeah, well, they added one, and I didn't want to read because they try to make it seem like it's really gay affirming. It's not.
That's cute, though.
So anyway, when you drop a buck in that kettle, it may go to disaster relief, or it may go to fun things like their fight to prevent New Zealand from decriminalizing homosexual behavior in 1986. They lost big on that one, and in the blistering public rebuke that followed, they called for everyone to treat each other with respect.
Right. Meaning, hey, just because we're hateful doesn't mean you guys can be mean to us.
We lost, so shut up.
Exactly.
Or their fight to force laws in the UK that would prevent any school or local authorities, and this was in the 2000s, from promoting, the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretend relationship, end quote.
Yeah, they work really hard on that one.
Yeah, and that's a fight they won. That law has since been repealed, but not before a ton of schools closed down pro-LGBTQ student organizations, and a lot of pain kind of resulted from that. Or you might be funding their threat in 2004 to shut down all their soup kitchens in New York City if the city went ahead with forcing everyone doing business in the city to treat their LGBTQ employees like human beings. The Salvation Army, which for reasons that make perfect sense in this anecdote was nicknamed the Starvation Army by the Wobblies, threatened to withhold food from desperate people if they couldn't keep being shitty to whatever gay people were luckless enough to be in their employ or need a bed for the night.
Right. They wanted to not even to not have to hire them also.
Yeah. And in fact, one article I read was by a guy who had experienced homelessness years prior to writing this article, and went to in the middle of the winter, went to the Salvation Army for emergency help, which they predicated on the condition that he and his boyfriend break up before they could eat.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, Jesus loves them. So that's the Salvation Army, y'all. There are plenty of good people out there doing good things because they have a functioning moral compass, not because hungry people can be snookered to hear about Jesus if you dangle a hot meal in front of them.
Yeah, it's probably best not to support the good deeds of a hate group.
Exactly. Right, because that's giving them cover.
Right.
And good that they're doing good deeds, but it's fucking giving them cover. So, if you're feeling generous, you can give to the amazing non-proselytizing people at orgs like Doctors Without Borders, the underappreciated Veterinarians Without Borders, the amazing people at Modest Needs, the critical work of the Trevor Project, the awesome Foundation Beyond Belief, and of course, as you know, our pet cause this coming month, the proverbial watchers on the wall, the incredible Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Right, which you can give to and help your favorite uncles all at one time by becoming a donor to our show.
It's a win-win.
You can keep religion out of schools and keep your uncles and eggnog through December. Why wouldn't you do that?
Who loses in that?
So skip the kettle. Homophobia always gets plenty of funding without your help somehow. So,
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Moving on.